Jeff, you're so bravely unpacking so many big concepts, ideas, experiences. And when I say concepts, I really don't mean it at that mental level. Here you are emoting with us and being with it fully. All the bodies, emotional body, and you're letting us, see the tears, and it's so evocative in such a beautiful and meaningful way. And I took some notes while you were speaking because I heard some things that are not very common. We have, crossed paths before in that different setting that I was invoking in the beginning, the retirement industry space. And we don't hear these kinds of expressions from men in the industry very often. So what I wanted to connect here is, you've called your daughter a sensitive soul a couple times as you were sharing about your family experience, your story, her trials and tribulations, and the inspiration that she is today to yourself and many, many others. And how incredible that you've turned this unimaginable loss into a mission. But what I've noticed through all that is that you are a sensitive soul too. And you are bravely doing something that is, very different than what we hear from often. I'm going to say it, other men in the industry. So do you find yourself, I'm curious, speaking differently with guys, especially around mental health and these emotional truths? Because you spoke so beautifully about coaching the young women and telling them, hey, maybe you want to consider a different attitude. And here you are role modeling something that's,
Mhm.
not particularly common.
Yeah, I do think the conversations are different because there's always the crossover where you have similarities, whether that person is a man or a woman from that point in time. But there are just different, whether it has been ingrained in us through the environment or through our own internal ecosystem. I find the conversations that I can have, or I should say, the conversations that come out of the conversation, meaning that when I share and talk about it, it opens up a different level of conversation and sharing. And I've heard some of the most horrific stories. And I mean, as I mentioned, my daughter's journey was not good. It was painful. It was terrible. But I have not gone through what I have heard stories of other people that have gone through, and I won't get into them now. There's just, I don't know how you get through that, other than you find a way. But there's just so many stories like that. On the guy side of that, though, I mean, I think there's some that once you let your guard down, their guard will come down. Some will never let their guard down. They may want to, but they just don't. And that machismo or that tough mindedness mindset or whatever, I think, works to their detriment as they go forward. But what I have found that I have impact with is being less, tolerant, meaning that of bad actors, bad actions, bad activities, even if the language or statements of just not tolerating, that kind of mindset and or approach. I think so. The conversations are definitely different. I think the receptiveness is different, but it's not mutually exclusive. I still have tremendous support from men in this industry, all the way from Jeff Cullen at SRP to Brian Graff at the ARA, and I could go down through listing names, but I'd be leaving people out as I went through that have been exceptionally emotional and supportive and open. But I also find it's usually because they've dealt with something in their own life, whether it was a spouse, a parent, a child. But usually, if you haven't gone through something like that, it's hard to get your head around what does that really mean or not mean. So, but no matter who we are, the older we get, the more opportunity comes to run into those kind of life events. As the old say, nobody gets out of this world alive. Very few get out unscathed. Things happen from there. And I think those are there, back to your approach, those pivot movements where it's real, and it's not conversation, it's not joking around type thing. I just find that women in particular have probably had more, they identify with Amber more because they're women. I mean, they've been there. That self-esteem points in time, self-confidence, that not speaking up because it was all men in the room and one woman, or that imposter syndrome, or so on. Back to the baseball story I used, guys tend to fake it till they make it and bluff their way through it more than women do. And I am no expert. I'm not I'm giving advice, guidance. I'm just telling a story and using observations I have from that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're telling your story, right? Like, and I think that's, and Evie, feel free, to join in here, but I think that means so much, that honest, open communication and knowing sometimes they have somebody to talk to. Were you going to say something similar, Evie?
Just just how profoundly, moving it is to hear you speak into a lot of these things that oftentimes don't coexist in the same conversation. So you are able to, comment on, folks that professionals, them in that setting, and then you're able to speak into the grief and the loss that they may have had, and then you're switching gears and you're talking about young girls and what's happening there, and what might be going on for them that goes unnoticed. Then you're doing this amazing commentary on society, no judgment. The whole time you're just running on love, Jeff. That's what's really amazing for me. So I just wanted to like really presence that this holistic conversation, and where I get excited, and here's what I think you and Amber are doing together, and this legacy of a holistic, wholesome approach. That doesn't mean you have to go through all of this in a conversation where you're, strategically deciding on the next steps when it comes to a particular approach that you're going to take with your firm, right? But you can still infuse that conversation with this bigger awareness, like you were saying, of everyone's going through something and what's the bigger mission we're trying to achieve. And I think that one of the really beautiful things you are talking about, without saying the word, I don't think we've mentioned it once yet, is legacy, which is what the entire industry is playing with. And here you are really, being a steward of a legacy in a situation that typically chronologically goes differently, right? The order of some of these events should have been biologically, let's say chronologically different, right? Not
Right.
you talking about legacy, but here you are making some of these impossible things possible. And the last comment I wanted to make was, you're talking about, I don't know, metaphor or analogy of the scab and picking at the scab. And really what I see is you just reinforcing this experience of like keeping your heart wide open, because it cracked, like it broke open, and allowing it to stay cracked open while continuing to have perhaps even like tougher skin in some of the instances. Like when you talked about not being tolerant of the bad apples, and you were talking about that from more of a current situation. For me, that episode that you talked about, the situation with the boys, the awful commentaries that your girl heard, like there you are, basically continuing to do something about it. So there can be a toughness about that comes from this internal softness, and I just really, really love that, and commend you for it. And I'm grateful that there are folks like you out there, paving a new
Well,
way.
and I appreciate that. And like I said, back to the legacy, I don't really even think of it in a legacy terms because we have too much work to do and we have too many starfish to save, and it's too early to look back and say, wow, look what we accomplished or did, because there's too much looking forward to what we have to do. And I think the other point that you raised that I just is now become so ingrained in me is just the concept of the random acts of kindness and random acts of respect and random acts of appreciation, because it's unfortunately in the youth in particular, and it affects us all as adults, but the nasty vitriol that has become our society and is so prevalent because of social media and television and politics and all of that, young impressionable minds, you get wrapped up in well, that's how the world is, and that's how the world happens to be, and that's what I've got to be if I'm going to be successful in the world, but being successful in the world still does not deal with the person you're looking at in the mirror every day and trying to determine, do you really like who you see? And are you, if that was your friend, are you proud that that's your friend, type thing. And I make a comment all the time that if you let someone else say to you the things that you say to yourself in your own head, you probably wouldn't hang out with that person. You'd get new friends because you couldn't stand to be around them, but you can't separate that. You've got to learn how to, work through that. So all we're trying to do is, like I said, is raise awareness, raise money, create chapters around the country, and impact as many, starfish as we can. But by raising the awareness, it even lets the adults have better conversations among themselves, because as simple as this sounds, and sometimes we make it way too complicated from there, it's pretty hard to get through this life, whether you're male or female, without interacting with other females. I mean, you got a mother. I mean, it's pretty hard to be here if you didn't have a mother. And who knows what your mother went through? You got sisters, you've got daughters, you've got nieces, you've got colleagues. This isn't an isolated girl woman problem. I mean, when I talk about women in general, you're 50% of the population, and nobody's here without a mother. So how do you say, well, that's not my problem, it's not my issue? It's everybody's issue. And we can't be in the curative mode all the time. Somewhere along the line, we got to work harder at the preventative mode. Otherwise, we're chasing our tail on fixing everybody later, so to speak.
No, and you're so right. Like especially, and I say this all the time about myself, right? Like I'm completely a different person. You have imposter syndrome when you're young. I have imposter syndrome today sometimes, right? Those kind of things. And really having that reinforcement, I think what you're doing with Amber's Aces is such a beautiful tribute to your daughter. So I think that's an amazing piece. And usually we ask, how is this pivot a step forward? But I think you've answered that for us, for yourself, unless you have something to add, because what you're doing for her, for young women, for others out there, I think is amazing. So, I love that you put your energy in that, because I can see how much that means to you. And I want to tell our listeners that we will put the information out about rocks, about Amber's Aces in our show notes. So if you would like to get involved, I'm sure that there are many young women who would really appreciate that. And Jeff, we appreciate so much you being here with us today, sharing your story. I'm sure as much as you've shared it, it's still not easy to do some days. But we are thankful that we could help you share this story and help you share this message, and that you shared it with us and our listeners. So,
well, I appreciate you having me. Like I said, I look for any platform I can have to tell the story, and going forward, like I said, it's not a legacy, it's not a tribute, but at this point, it's almost a mission that I share with my daughter, and I can continue to share as long as I can have a platform and an audience and spread the word. That's what we're going to do.
well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Evie, any final comments from you?
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for your, for your generosity with your time, with your energy, with your bravery. And thank you also for these, small adjustments you made with some of these words, because these details matter. And you on the kind of final note about the words, I know that you've also, considered this notion of like who made whom proud, who is making whom proud, who's proud here. And I would just love to hear if you have had any changes to how you think about that. I know you get comments about you must be making your daughter proud. And
Um,
I think it's so much bigger than that.
I think it's one of the things, one of the mental health issues is my daughter could never get her arms around the fact that I made her proud. She always wanted me to be prouder, if you will. And that back to the mental side of things and it's all root is she was never really, I think, proud of herself. So I think the idea about pride is so misused and misallocated and misaligned, because the idea of, are you proud of me? Am I proud of you? That's not the issue. The issue is, when you look in the mirror, are you proud of who you see? Because then all the other things, do you like who you see? Are you proud of who you see? Are you happy with who you see? If you can't have that conversation with the person looking back in the mirror, none of the other things will ever fall in place, because in essence, my daughter wanting me to be prouder of her was really trying to fill a hole that she wasn't proud enough of herself. So when I look at those things, that I'm very proud of her, hope she's proud of me. But what I really hope, even wherever she is at this point in time, she is proud of herself, because ultimately, if we can teach all young girls and young women the same thing, who you are is good enough, but practice Kaizen. And Kaizen is make your best better just a little bit better every day for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Don't stop, don't slow down, but wherever you are today is good enough. Just make it a little bit better tomorrow, and find ways to be proud of yourself, because that is the catalyst for getting in to wherever it is you want to go on your own terms, by your own definition. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, that was an amazing way to end this episode, Jeff. We appreciate so much you being here, sharing this amazing story. I don't even know what else to say. So
No,
thank you
just a
again so
thank you.
much. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
And from Evie and I, we really appreciate sharing it and sharing with our listeners. To our listeners, thank you so much for listening to this episode. And remember, if you have a pivot, step into it.